We are live.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Board of Education Policy Committee meeting. Today is Thursday, September 12th, 2024, and the time's now 5:02 p.m. With me this evening, I have board members Janine Randolph, Mary Ellen Flaherty Ludwig, and then from the team, I have Ralph Felenzizi, Kimberly Bird Carolina, and Robert Pennington. And so first item actually is approval of minutes. I didn't know if anyone had any changes, corrections.
Oh, they look good to me.
No, fine.
Okay, so
Look good.
motion to approve minutes,
I move to approve.
Mary Ellen. and then
Second,
Seconded by Janine. So minutes have been approved. Thank you. I didn't get, next one item is public comments. I didn't see any emails on my end, and no one seems to be online for any public comments.
No.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you very much. So I'm going to pass the meeting over to you, Ralph, and thank you very much for everybody for being here this evening. I know that it's we're all still trying to get used to getting back to the swing of things with committee meetings, and thank you.
Yeah, no, definitely. And thank you, Chairman Carpio and board members and stuff. Happy to be here tonight. And thanks, Kimberly and Rob, for joining tonight as well. Tonight, we have 5 policies that we're going to go over. 2 which are just updates, 2 which are reinstatements of old policies, and then 1 is a second conversation around our civility policy. So knowing that 2 that are pretty quick to go through with just some updates, I was hoping that Mr. Pennington can go first. I'll share out my screen with the policies and allow him to speak so then he can get back down to his daughter's soccer game. And with that,
Right. Well, thank you, Ralph. So the first policy that we are going to discuss is the regulations regarding suicide prevention and intervention. And it is a policy that we already currently have in the district. We have our different components. We have our team. We have our crisis intervention team in place. But I do think that one big update is this idea of the regulation that is tied to the policy. And if Ralph, if you could scroll down, it goes through very specific components around management of suicidal risk and the different team members and everything that like what happens in those situations. And one of the ways that Norwalk Public Schools supports this, and we currently have one of these in place, but we're going to have a new one, is the risk assessment and intervention guide. The last one was put into place in 2021, and our new one will be hopefully ready for distribution in October of 2024. Right now, it is going through a feedback cycle with our related service providers, psychologists, social workers, our counselors, and our administrators for any last minutes of feedback, because it does break down some very specific pieces of what happens when a student is at risk or when an intervention needs to be put into place. And that's what this regulation it refers to. It breaks down those different components around what happens if, and that is what our risk assessment and intervention guide breaks down in very specific format for our team. It talks about the child study team or mental health team in the building, and it goes through step by step what to do if a student is in imminent danger, at risk. And so this is something our clinical team, they use and to support students. So it looks at suicide risk factors, danger factors, so on and so forth. And we provide training for our staff on a yearly basis.
And Rob, if I can just summarize too, so
That'd be great.
this policy is actually already currently in place.
Mhm.
Really, we're just as with anything else, we're making sure that you realize that there's a recommendation by Shipman and Goodwin for a regulation that should be posted. So we're actually just adding the regulation and making it. I don't think this is something you need to necessarily vote on at all because the policy is already in place. It's just making sure that there's an awareness that there is a regulation and there's actually a process that Mr. Pennington and his team's actually been working on to make it a little bit even procedures internally to be able to make things happen quickly.
If it's not a new policy, the wording on the agenda should be a little bit different because new is in front of policy instead of regulation. And I don't want the public to think, that it's a new policy.
Okay. Yep. And we'll make that adjustment.
Thank you. Any questions, Mary Ellen, Janine? And can we scroll over to the highlighted section too, please?
Sure. So the highlighted section on this is actually, since there are no changes to the policy, the highlights that you see are just the notes from Shipman and Goodwin recommending that we have these in place and what you should have in your regulation. The other highlighted parts are contact information. So it says, this is where you add that in.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have any questions, but it's an unfortunate topic, but I think that it's great that there is, information out there and kind of a step-by-step procedure on what needs to be done or what should be done.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. We want to make sure that we're really have a systematic approach that we follow as an organization, because that really builds out consistency in approach when there are these very specific components that we want to follow. It's like, as you said, Janine, difficult topic, but as an organization, we want to make sure that we are doing our due diligence as an organization.
Okay, thank you.
Well, thank you. So we'll go on to our next policy. And the next policy is, once again, this is an update. I'll let Mr. Pennington talk about it in just a second, but we do already have this policy once again in play for physical activity for students. This year, there was a requirement to have play-based learning policy in place for pre-K and K. And that was the addition that was added to the policy, which and I'll let Mr. Pennington talk more about that piece and what that looks like. So once again, this is as you can see in the highlighted area, we do have these parameters already in place. We've had them in place. We just wanted to make sure we updated it with the pre-KK language that's now been added.
Sure. And I think that that's important. And we talk a lot about recess at different components. And as Ralph said, that is a policy. But one of the big changes at the state level last year was this implementation of play-based learning. And so that is something that we wanted to make sure it is highlighted in our policy because it is a state policy now. And if you go to, because this piece around recess, Ralph, is the same that we have had, but if you go to right there, play-based learning requirements, and it says pre-K to grade 5. And so this is the new component of the policy. And what it really focuses on is play-based learning during instructional time for all students and kindergarten and pre-K. And so we're lucky in the sense that in kindergarten, we have center time, and center time fulfills our play-based learning. We also policy also permits play-based learning in grades 1 through 5 as well. So then they break down some definitions and different components around the difference between free play, guided play, and play-based learning. And so, like I said, when we're looking at play-based learning, it's a pedagogical approach that emphasizes play in promoting learning, developmentally appropriate strategies that integrate into existing learning standards. It does not mean time spent in recess or of part of a PE course. So an example of play-based learning is centers where students have a chance to go and play with manipulatives for math tied to mathematical standards. So we have centers, and those centers have different play-based learning connections in that piece. So I did want to, like, that is the change to this policy, and that is what has been passed at a state level, and we need to make sure that our policy is representative of that. Any questions? And all of our pre-Ks are built around play-based learning. So that is, I think that the shift for like statewide is really in that kindergarten model, because it does focus on that as well. And so from a district standpoint, the fact that we have incorporated centers, I would say 3 years ago, we're ahead of the game, and we believe in play-based learning.
Rob, would you say that aspects of the play-based learning, when we're talking 1 through 5, would be what might have been called before hands-on learning, particularly in science, where they experiment with different things and not for an academic reason, but it's less structured in the introduction to the work, in a similar way that manipulatives would introduce you to the concept of a math problem, but then you kind of play with it and see different ways that could get the same answer.
Yes, but I do think that there is some level of choice in like a center's approach that creates some of that play-based learning. Whereas if you're building out a science experiment or a science activity, it's not necessarily play-based learning. It's an instructional strategy that you're using, but that's much more guided by the teacher than it is this concept of utilizing, like, allowing students to have some choice in those centers, because one center might focus on manipulatives and the next one might be focused in on art tied to art standards, and the next one might be like writing tied to writing standards. And so like students would then have the opportunity to go into different centers to engage in different components of that work. So
I appreciate that explanation.
There are
clarification.
opportunities in grades 1 through 5 for centers. So I do want to say that there is that opportunity, and teachers do try to take advantage of it. But it is something that is embedded in our kindergarten curriculum and schedule.
Yes. Okay. That's a good clarification.
We're good. I don't have any questions.
Okay,
Janine, quiet too. Okay.
thank you.
Yeah, no,
It's fine.
All right.
So this is one that we would want to move on.
Okay. So motion to move physical activity, undirected play, and student discipline to the full board.
So moved.
so moved.
Mary Ellen, and seconded by Janine. So thank you both. So that's unanimous. So we'll move that to the full board.
And thank you, Rob, for joining us.
Thank you, Rob.
Absolutely.
Good luck.
Thanks,
to your
Rob.
daughter.
Thanks, Rob.
Thank you, everyone. Have a
Senators.
great evening.
Okay. So our next policy is actually the next two policies are really reinstatements of policies that exist in the past. And you'll see us doing this as we kind of reevaluate what we need to bring back that was in the past. The first one I'll talk about, and then I'll pass it over to Kimberly to take over for the last two policies, which is also then the conversation with our civility policy. This policy is called actually an innovative program policy.
Can I
What this
interrupt you a second? What do
Sure.
you mean by reinstatement? Like, why did we have to, just to clarify for the public, why do we have to talk about reinstating these?
So yes, so to clarify, these were policies that as we brought on our model policies, we sunset all the old policies and have been going back through making sure that we have the proper policies in place and policies that we know that we need to reinstate as we're doing this assessment are ones that we're bringing back. This is one that there is no model policy for, but is important for us to have. And it allows us to be able to bring in pilot and innovative programs. So the policy itself is pretty straightforward. It just talks about the fact that when we have, especially at the high school level, when we have new courses, new ways of teaching, all of that goes to the curriculum committee, it goes through the program of studies for approval. When we want to, and this is with board approval as well, we need to make sure that we have the option to be able to make modifications to our instruction in small pilot programs. And then before it becomes a larger adoption, then it goes to the board the way it should. But having the ability to be able to make an adoption. So let's say it could be something similar to say, having a portfolio as a mastery-based learning piece instead of just a regular digital learning component, to be able to do that so that students can actually create that portfolio. This is just common practice, but it's something that we really did have before. We just needed to make sure we reinstated that we have the ability to do that in the process. What this policy basically outlines is that there's always instructional change that goes on. We want to make sure we do that, but we do it with a process that the board is aware of. And along with it is a regulation, which is pretty quick, that just talks about before there's actually any true broad-based implementation, this would go to with data to the board, and so that it could be put into the program of studies effectively. But it doesn't stop us from doing some small pilot programs in different places. It also talks about the fact of, if it's a minor improvement to a program, I guess that could relate to, we want to use this piece of software instead of this piece of software. That stuff is stuff that we would have the leverage to be able to kind of make those adjustments as time goes on. So that, for the most part, is really the policy. It's exactly, we've made no changes to what we had in the past.
Right.
I'm happy to answer any questions on it.
No, sorry, go ahead.
So no, it even though this was pushed aside when we put all the model programs in, we have still been working in this manner.
In some cases, yeah, and we want to make sure that we actually have policy in place that actually reflects everything that we do. Yes.
Yes, so this is reflecting what you're doing. Lots of innovation occurring, and I can see the advantage of just spelling it out.
Yeah, exactly. Because
Yes.
and it's just putting the process in place, because we have brought everything to the board as we've been doing any kinds of implementations. This is just actually making sure that there's policy to back that up in our process.
Yeah, and it's wonderful work too that it's being done with innovation. You guys are keeping on top of things and making changes as things upgrade and change in technology. I mean, it's
Constantly.
an everyday thing, It's like, I don't know how you do it, but it's great. And the grants that you guys have been able to get, and the working partnerships too with different companies.
Right, with Verizon, for example.
Mhm.
But
And
this is
even-
broader than just digital, isn't it?
That's
It's-
right.
It's
I
all,
was gonna,
I'm thinking of potentially having an education pathway. I mean, that you're experimenting a little bit with that, and so it's broad, but the
Yes.
digital comes up right away.
definitely, you think of that when you hear innovation, but it is truly all the work-based learning opportunities that we can bring in, the work that we've done in gifted and talented to update, all of those areas are actually all innovations. And, I give Mr. Pennington a lot of credit for making sure that all that stuff is moving along too, as a team.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's pretty much it on that one.
All right,
Thank you.
Thank you.
thanks.
So this one, we do need to vote on, because it's policy.
Okay.
Yeah. Again, do we need to change the new to regulation or the wording a little differently,
No,
reinstatement?
because it's actually a policy as well. So it's a policy, and then I just included the regulation so you saw
Yeah,
it.
but is it a brand new policy?
I guess since we from the way that we've been posting them, because it was something that is being reinstated,
Mhm.
I think we'd want to label it as new because it was sunset and we're bringing it back as a new policy.
Okay. All right, so motion to move to the full board 6014 and 6014A, new policy and regulation for innovation.
So moved.
I second.
Thank you, Janine and Mary Ellen. Okay,
Thank you. All right, so our next one is somewhat similar. And if my computer does what it needs to do, it's just freezing up right now. Our next policy is actually also a reinstatement. As you remember, at the beginning of the summer, we were looking at trying to put in a service dog policy. As we went back through our policies, we realized that we actually had sunset a service animal policy, which is exactly what we were looking for. So the idea would be to bring back that policy, and I know that Kimberly will take it over from there. I know she's had a chance to kind of review, and I apologize, but I just have to see.
That's okay.
Overdose.
I can start. Good
Okay,
evening, all.
thank you.
aye.
Hi.
Sorry.
Oh. And hello to the puppy too.
Yeah, I'm fine.
It's okay. Okay, so the service animal policy. This policy is in alignment with the ADA, the American with Disabilities Act. And so the policy speaks to students and staff members who are disabled and who utilize a service animal. And so, the policy goes into where service animals can be. For example, they can be in any facility, building, classroom, on the grounds, anywhere on our properties and any transportation, and also and during any activity that is sponsored in whole or in part by the district. The policy also goes on to state that what we as a district will not be doing with reference to the service animal. For instance, we will not be taking control of this animal. We will not be responsible for the care of this animal, feeding this animal at all. The owner of the animal and the person is the person having the control and custody of the animal, and all service animals need to be properly trained and housebroken. And they should also not be disruptive if they're going to be in classrooms or in offices. Should not be disruptive or pose any type of risk. And then lastly, the superintendent or her designee is authorized to provide guidance to teachers and principals and staff on how to fully integrate a service animal of a disabled student or staff member into that environment.
How does allergies work when it comes to animals, service animals?
Good question.
I'm sorry, what was the question again?
How do allergies work with a service animal? Because I know, yeah,
Oh,
like if the child has a service animal, but then there's another student that may be allergic to dogs.
right, yeah, and actually, it's funny that you bring that up because where I was before, we had a situation exactly like that where
Mhm.
it was a student who needed to bring their service animal into the classroom, and it was actually a professor who had an allergy to the dog, and so trying to work with um, both parties to see how can we best do this. I mean, is it a situation where, and in my situation there, it was looking at, do we put up like the plexiglass barrier, so like, to limit, I guess, the interaction, or also offering the student the possibility of taking the class, being remote while everybody else is in the class. That's not the most ideal, but if that's what it actually needed to come to, we were prepared to do that. Putting different measures in place to try and minimize the interaction between the student and the professor. And I would imagine it would kind of be the same way in this instance, if a student needs to bring in a service animal and then there's another student who's allergic to that particular animal, I would imagine we would try to look at ways where we can minimize that contact. Is it possible that the student can take a different class, be moved to a different class, so that they're not in contact with each other? So I think we would have to review it on a case by case basis and then
Mhm.
see how best we can support both.
And I think that's how we actually handled it even from a 504 standpoint,
Mhm.
a number of years ago as well. And that last paragraph actually speaks to that it authorizes the superintendent to be able to help guide a case by case basis who needs to be involved to be able to make sure that we actually put the right parameters in place to make this successful.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Janine, Mary Ellen?
No, thank you.
That was an excellent question, Diana, and a good answer for building relationships, trying to weigh what is needed for everybody. I think that's the right approach.
All right, so with no other questions, I can have a motion to move 5036 new service animals policy to the full board.
I so
So
moved.
moved. Second,
Okay, Mary Ellen, and seconded by Janine. Thank you.
Okay, and so the civility policy, this is the one that we spoke about last time when we met, and then there was a recommendation to add in some language about attending extracurricular sports. Having that being included in in the policy, and so that language has been added in, and so if you want to take a look at it again, or ask any questions at this time. I think we did review it before, so it was just to add in that particular language that's highlighted.
Yep,
Yes,
I'm good with that language.
yes.
that looks good. I would like to add that in the interim, I did a thorough reading of this, and I do very much appreciate that there's clear language of what not being civil is. That
Mhm.
it's a
Mhm.
really low bar. I mean, it says not just offensive language, but even loud or a display of temper.
Mhm.
That's people should not be subject to that. That is
Mhm.
teachers, principals, parents, children, across the board. Everything all our interactions should have a level of civility. And I feel very strongly about this. I'm really glad that we have something that specifies what is not considered civil. And particularly, this is going to be impactful at the extracurricular because people are a little looser and more relaxed when they go to a football game or a soccer game. And still the pain of being around or being the object of offensive language still is very painful. And we don't want anybody to be experiencing that. We want to have guardrails. And so I really like the wording of this, and I really like that we have it. And as always, I'm hoping that lots of people in our district read it so everybody has a even footing.
All right, any other questions?
No, I agree with Mary Ellen. It's very thorough, and I think it's needed to be out there.
Yep, and for the public, this was our second read through because we already had seen it, so I don't want anyone to think that we're just moving along quickly on this one. It was basically, we tabled it to add that other wording.
And just to add, it has here not only in person, but any threatening emails or texts, that just communications between all of the citizens of our district, all of it should have a level of civility.
All right. So I need a motion to move policy 9024, the new civility. Yep.
I second.
Okay, so moved by Janine, seconded by Mary Ellen, and thank you both. So thank you, everyone, for this meeting. And, there's a lot that goes into this. I know that you guys work behind the scenes trying to, keep us in line and in, regulations and legal and everything else. So we do appreciate everything that you do. And with that, I need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Yay, Janine.
Second.
All right, thank you, everybody. Talk to
Bye-bye.
you later.
All right.
Everybody have a good night.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Take care.
Bye-bye. Thanks for the work.